Tell us, Anna, this archive you found, the letters, the box.
Right.
How did you feel? What was remember? Can you remember, like, well, not the day when you discovered it
Right.
for the first time, but like when you finally recalled
So,
it? What
what
was the feelings? Was
Right.
it moving? Did you realize that you found some treasure?
Yes. So what I really opened was not the actual box, but what I really opened was the email. The email from my research assistant in Kiev, who sent me the scans of some of the documents. And I glanced through them, and these were Yiddish typed materials. It was not so easy for me to see what they were, so I was magnifying them on the computer. And then I was looking at it, and I remember the first one I saw was the one called Tulchin, about the song about the destruction of the Jewish community in Tulchin. And I'm reading that, and I'm thinking, that's such a profound poetry. And yet it sounds like a song from my childhood, something set to Soviet music. And I was thinking, how come I didn't know it existed? And it was talking about children and women walking on their death to Pechora. And Pechora is this ghetto / camp where so many Ukrainian Jews were killed or were almost killed during the war, and there's no information about this. So first I was excited, there's something about Tulchin, something about Pechora, that we didn't have that stuff. But then I realized that's the first song about Pechora that I see. And then I started clicking through all these emails and reading these materials. And I had to, honestly, I had to sit back and think, this is unbelievable. This material is going to change the entire history of the Holocaust. It's going to change the entire history of Yiddish culture. This material is going to make a revolution in our understanding of how Soviet Jews lived and died during World War II. And the more I read that stuff, more sure I was that my first impression was right. As it is often in life, the first impression is right. And with this material, it only got better. And then some of this stuff was handwritten. I can show you later. It was very hard to read and hard to understand. And I had to consult with some of my colleagues, helping, I would send them the magnified text and ask them to help me read it, because I couldn't even make the words. And then later I started thinking, why are they handwritten with all this different handwriting? And it turns out that these were letters that soldiers or Jews who lived in ghettos or Jews who were hiding with non-Jews in Ukraine were writing and sending there. And these letters were written in 1941, 42, 43. They're written in Yiddish. Also a lot of letters from Central Asia. And then I thought, wait a second, we don't have letters like that. They don't exist. And suddenly it was another kind of wow moment, because it was not just the work of scholars who collected the material, but also everyday people writing music, literally in the face of death in Yiddish. So every day when I looked at this material and I thought about this, I thought how amazing it was that it actually survived.
How did you decide that, this music, these letters have to be turned into songs?
Right. I thought about this, and it's an interesting dilemma and choice for any scholar working with materials like this. Your first instinct is to say, wow, I found something amazing, I'm going to write a book about this. Then I thought, okay, I will write a book about this, and it will be a book which I hope will be serious and rigorous, like everything that I write. But I thought, who's going to read this? Who's going to read this? And the number of academic book publishing is a very narrow field. Academic readership is even more narrow. They say you're lucky 5 people read the actual book that you write, as opposed to just the cover of the book that you write. So And as I was reading these words, I thought, they were collected as music. They were supposed to be published as music. And if Stalin did not arrest the scholars who collected this material, and if this history of the Soviet Union went the other way, they will be songs. So I thought, I already have tenure. I have, I have already done a lot of academic research, so I don't have to limit myself to traditional modes of working on scholarship. So I thought I should work with a musician, but it was so that was an easy decision actually. The harder decision was to think about who I should show this stuff to, because I really needed a person who would get Yiddish, which limits the number of people significantly. I needed a person who would totally get the musical nature of that material, so they will understand that it's not purely klezmer music. It's not a Jewish, it's not necessarily Jewish folk music. It's also Soviet music. And then the person who has enough imagination and scholarly training to be able to do that. And when you narrow all this down, there's only one person in the world who could do that, and that's Psoy Korolenko, who has a PhD in Russian literature and who's famous for his for bringing scholarship and literary theory into his music and into his art, and who has deep passion for Yiddish. So that was my next phone call.
When you heard the first songs at the concert,
Yes.
what it was like when you heard them performed, I guess during the rehearsals even.
Yeah.
Can you describe us? How did it feel? What did you think? Part of,
my honest.
Was it uplifting?
Right. Well, during the rehearsals and even during the first performance, all I felt was the stress for the musician. That doesn't go into the trailer, I guess. But at some point when I saw that entire group, the Yiddish Glory Band, standing on that stage and Psoy singing that song about Donbass, with acting out all the characters, I almost cried. Because, it doesn't happen very often that a piece of paper that you find in some obscure archive becomes a piece of art that so many people sit there and enjoy. And especially, I wanted to cry when the audience began to laugh, because he did such a brilliant job and it was so beautiful and funny. But I wanted to cry because I couldn't believe how real that art suddenly became, And it's a very, very special moment which I will treasure.
What's about these songs have been written to preserve, I guess, these people were sending these letters to preserve them for the history, for the future. Yeah. And then they were forgotten.
Right.
And
I think even those of them who survived forgot that they wrote those songs. And go ahead.
And so it's reviving the music, isn't it? It's what's the significance of this?
So we're reviving. So first we're making memory. So first we're bridging history and memory, and I don't know if you're aware of this part of my work, but before I found this archive, I was working with oral histories. I interviewed 474 Russian Jews born in the Soviet Union before 1920s. And my special interest was Yiddish. So I always asked them to sing Yiddish songs that they remembered and all that stuff. So, and a lot of people did. I recorded a huge number of songs, and my first book talked a lot about the Yiddish songs about Stalin. This became my trademark and all this. So I have a very kind of extensive knowledge of that stuff. The interesting part was that I've never recorded any Yiddish song that they sang during World War II. I thought, and so did most historians, and they still do until today, that once the war began, Soviet Jews switched from Yiddish to Russian, because even today they can't remember the war in Yiddish. When this material was found, it told us that this was not the case at all. They were singing in Yiddish about what was going on. So when these materials became music, and these materials became art. It allowed us to tell the story, which essentially contradicted the popular memory and the perception. It said that Yiddish existed during the war and it was a living language, and that is something that most people didn't understand about Yiddish and how it functioned during World War II. We still know very little about this.
Do you know, like, were you surprised to find, songs, the type of songs about Red Army and
No.
in Yiddish and Stalin?
I was not surprised. So I was not surprised to find songs about Stalin because